Hi everybody. Today I want to do another mental health vlog, and this particular vlog is going to, I guess it'll be more like a discussion or a talk. It's going to go off of a video that I did previously, which is taking responsibility for your mental health. And the previous video basically said that just because we do something because of our mental illness doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't responsible for it. You know, if you do something during an episode that hurts somebody else, just because you did it during an episode and it was unintentional, doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't hurt the person. They're still hurting, they're still suffering. Same thing if you do something to yourself. Just because you did it during a mental health episode and later you come out of that episode, it doesn't mean that there weren't repercussions, and we still need to take responsibility for those repercussions and understand that other people are still people, and if they can't be in our lives because of our mental illness and it's just too damaging to them, that we need to respect that and take responsibility for that. But this video is going to talk about taking responsibility, but also being aware that it's still our mental illness. We tend to do things during episodes that later on we regret, and we kind of feel like it's our fault, and it is us doing it, but at the same time it is an illness. For instance, just because I have a cold doesn't mean that I can magically make the cold go away. And I feel like that's a lot of issue that people who are mentally ill have. They're just like, why can't I just make this go away? And they'll think, oh, I should have had more control, or oh, I could have stopped that. But if it's a mental illness, it's still an illness. It's not because you're doing it to be intentional. It's not because you're a bad person. And we can still deal with our mental illness while being aware that other people don't necessarily have to be a projection of that, and they can distance themselves if they need to, and we can be more as responsible as we can be with the mental health illness. So when you're aware that you have a cold, what do? You can go and buy medicine, you can do some home remedies, you can do whatever it takes to kind of ease your illness. And with mental health, you can kind of do the same thing. The more you're aware of it, the more you can seek out tools. And I don't want to say that everyone has awareness of it. Not everyone has that luxury, and obviously there's different severities. There's people who are stuck in a mental health perpetually or for longer periods of time, so they're less aware of the repercussions that happen because of their mental illness. So this is more geared towards people who can go in and out of episodes and be more aware of what it is that they're doing and how to take responsibility, while also trying to make others understand. Because I feel like, because mental illness is very hard for neurotypical people to understand, that there's this disconnect between us, and a lot of times it leads to tumultuous kinds of relationships or feelings of abandonment. And so my number one is to try to tell people about your mental illness. I know that with all the stigma, that telling people can lead to a lot of people leaving us and whatnot, but the reason I encourage this is because the people who do care are going to try to understand. And I feel like finding the people who do care is going to be so much healthier for your life than not. So my first suggestion is to tell people about your mental health. Be as honest and open about it. Communicate, hey, I have the tendency to do this. When I am having an episode, this is what happens. This is what triggers my episodes. As much information as you know about your mental health, try to convey it. I know that I myself don't understand a lot of aspects about my mental health, and so it's hard for me to convey exactly what will happen, and there's so many different avenues that my mental health can take. So again, it does make it hard to convey, and I'm not at all trying to say that it's easy. But as much as you can, try to tell the people around you. And I know this has caused people to view me differently and people to judge me because their own misconceptions about mental health. And you know what, at the end of the day, as hard as it is to, especially because of my mental illness in particular, as hard as it is to feel unwanted, especially about something out of your control, it hurts, but the people who have stuck around and understand have made it so much better. And I don't regret telling them as much as I can about my mental health because it also makes it easier on them. You know, for years I didn't really know about my mental health, and I projected so much of my mental illness onto other people. And obviously, since I didn't have an understanding and they didn't have an understanding, it led to, discord and a lot of hurt. And I feel like being open has just made it a lot easier, at least for the people who do care, to understand me. And another reason I think this is important is because it allows the people in your life to set boundaries. And this is where the responsibility factor comes in, because just because you are going to act out a certain way doesn't mean that the other people in your life have to tolerate it. So when you're open about your mental health, the people in your life who really want you in the life will have the opportunity to tell you, hey, I understand that you do this, this, and this, but my limits personally are this, this, and this. And if you continue doing a certain way, it's too damaging for me to stay. And even though it might not be in your control, you still have to respect other people for not being able to handle the emotional chaos that can ensue from, keeping people with mental health into their life. So allow them to set boundaries. I know this part's really hard because you feel like them setting boundaries means that they're not accepting you for who you are. And I feel like that can be very hurtful because you're just like, well, I can't help that. And, you just feel like they're not accepting you for 100%. But at the same time, you have to be aware that they're human too, and they can only handle so much. So if they need to set boundaries, let them. Sometimes you might step a boundary, you might not have control because of your mental health, but at the same time, you have to be aware that they are also being affected by being in your life. And ultimately, them setting a boundary is damage control. Trust me. Having them set a boundary and then leaving you is so much better than them not setting boundaries and telling you that they'll be with you no matter what. Because let's say that they do leave and you look back and you're thinking, oh, why did they leave? And then you're thinking, oh yeah, it's because they said that if I did blink too much, they're not going to be able to stay. Whereas if they told you, oh, I'm going to be with you forever, I'm going to, no matter what you do, I'm going to stay with you, and then they leave, trust me, that is so much more damaging than if they had set a boundary, because at least with the boundaries you can look back and see why it is they left. Whereas if they told you that they're going to stay with you forever and then they leave, you feel like you did something wrong, or because, even the person who told you they would stay forever left, that means nobody will be able to stay with you. And it's a lot more damaging than if they had to set a boundary. And people who care and people who want you in their life will understand that mental health is not maliciousness. And I think this is where a lot of misinformation stems from. People say that people are mentally ill are bad people, they're manipulative, they're just terrible, they're psychopaths, they're sociopaths, they're whatnot. And sometimes they don't have those, disorders, and they're just trying their best. And I feel like this is because neurotypical people, and I live with one, so I understand that they exist, and I have mental health issues, so I'm thinking, oh, everybody feels this way, everybody knows what I'm dealing with. And the fact is they don't. And on the flip side, they don't understand what it is to like have mental illness, so they don't understand that you can't just stop. So it's very hard to deal with neurotypical people when you have mental health illness, because the way they process it is you take responsibility and then you stop. You know, once you become aware of the issue, you can just stop. You can become better. You can just make it all go away because you are aware of the issue. But when you have mental health issues, it's like having a cold. Just because you're aware of it doesn't make the illness go away. And as much as we take responsibility and as much as we are aware of it, doesn't necessarily mean it's just gonna go away overnight. You know, we can give ourselves the tools to cope, to deal, to do as much damage control as we can, but at the end of the day, we're still ill. We're still sick. We still have things that we need to work out, and sometimes, you know, we don't get cured. A lot of mental illness is not curable. And we're just trying our best. And I feel like I personally have gone through a lot because of my mental illness, and even stuff that I've taken responsibility for because of misinformation. Things happen all the time, and it's happened to me where people will lie about me. They'll, you know, say, oh, you know, she's malicious, she's manipulative, she's crazy, you know, stay away from her. And nothing that I do stems from maliciousness, and I do take responsibility for everything that I do after said and done. And I've never done anything to warrant the kind of lies that have been spread about me, but because I have a mental illness and I'm open about my mental illness, it's easy for people to lie about me, and people are like, oh, that makes sense because she's mentally ill, and what they said isn't at all what actually happened. So I've had people use my mental health illness against me by lying. You know, they'll exaggerate what happened, and then they will use it against me by saying, well, you know, she has this illness, which means, you know, that's what she does. And that's not the case. You know, it's not how things happened. And I take responsibility. When I fuck up, I say I fuck up. But there have been people who have lied about my mental illness, and other people have believed them just because I am open about my mental illness. They're just like, oh, that must be true because she's fucking crazy. So I've also had people leave me, and I mentioned this earlier before, where there's a difference between telling somebody your boundaries and then having to exit their life, and, you know, telling people you'll stay forever and then leaving them. And, you know, I've had people leave me in the worst ways, you know, just abruptly out of nowhere, never talk to me. And that's really damaging, and that's really hard. And lastly, another example I can think of is people have made it about them. People have made my mental illness about them. You know, I'll have a depressive episode and I will, you know, say I need to be alone, I want to be alone, I'm just having a bad time, and then they'll just be like, well, you must not want to be with me then, you must not want to be around me, obviously it's me, and I'm just like, no, it's not about you, it's about me, and I need space, or I need to have alone time, or, you know, people will misconstrue it and project it on me, and then all of a sudden I start getting angry, and, you know, they'll be like, oh, why are you angry, blah 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 blah, and I'm just like, because you're not allowing me to cope with my mental illness the way I want to, because you're making it about you, and now the only way I can cope with my mental illness is by getting angry. So I've also had situations where, you know, some of my mental illness can be triggered during like sexual interaction, and so I let people know what can happen during a sexual encounter with me, And I've had people, make that about them too. They're like, oh, I didn't do anything. Why are you acting like this? And like, it just makes me, while I'm having like an anxiety attack or like a dissociative situation, and while I'm in the middle of having this mental health episode, they're grilling me about what they did wrong, or, you know, stuff like that. And I'm just like, I can't take care of you right now. And like, I'm trying to deal with my own mental health illness, and here you are making it about you, and now I feel obligated to like comfort you and tell you that it's not about you. And at the same time, I'm having dissociative episode, and I'm like trying to be there, but I'm not there. And it's fucking crazy. It really is. And um, I think that's probably another really damaging thing, is when people make it about them, because you're dealing with your own shit and you've been honest about it, and when it finally happens, they don't understand it to the point where they make it about them, and it's frustrating and hard to deal with. So there's just so much going on with being with a mentally ill person and deciding that you want to be in their life. And I think at the end of the day, you still have to set your own boundaries if you do decide you want to be in somebody's life, and communicate as much as you guys can. Um, Try to be more understanding, especially if you are neurotypical and you have no experience with this. You're never going to actually know what it's like. And when someone's telling you how it is, it doesn't matter how disconnected you are from that actual situation. Just believe them, and yeah, it's hard. And we have to know that we are not responsible for anybody else. I'm not responsible for making people stay in my life when they can't, and people are not responsible for staying in my life when they can't. We have to be aware that everybody's a person and everybody has so much that they can take, and we have to be honest about what we are going to do and how we're going to do when we're mentally ill. So that's what this video is about. I just wanted to share that, people who have mental illness have an illness, and because it's an invisible illness, it makes it hard for people to understand why we do what we do. They think that we can just take responsibility and then end it, and that's not the case. And yeah, so I want to put it out there. It's an illness. And if you're going to be with somebody with an illness, you have to be aware that some things are going to happen during that illness, and it's not them being malicious, it's not them trying to be manipulative, it's not them faking it or being dramatic. It's something that they're actually going through. And so that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I do more videos. Bye.